Okay. All right.
Hello, social workers, mental professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of season 6 of the Social Work Brands podcast. I'm your host, Bass Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in, wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. Thanks, everybody, for love, support, and following and chatting away. And subscribing on YouTube and leaving comments or on the audio platforms that you guys listen to this podcast. So I appreciate all the love and support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That's all one word. Follow the podcast on Twitter. Don't let Elon scare you. At Social Work Rants, all one word. And don't let Zuckerberg do whatever Zuckerberg likes to do on Facebook, aka Meta. Type in the Social Work Brands podcast, hit the like button, and follow along with the page. Obviously, the YouTube channel. Uh, Hit the red subscribe button. Follow along. All videos be on YouTube, or you can listen to wherever audio platform you listen to podcasts, and type in the Social Work Brands podcast, and you see the logo and follow along on my journey. Celebrating 3 years of the podcast, so things are looking good. And my guest at this time, coming out of Virginia. Virginia's kind of catering towards like Virginia's. You're like the third or fourth social worker from
Oh,
Virginia has been on the podcast, and just driving through Virginia's interesting.
mhm. Yeah.
Just driving through it. So it's like, at least how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for coming along. We record this episode on a Saturday morning. So it's I had my breakfast already, so I got my coffee. So I'm good to go. I'm wide awake.
Yeah, same here.
So let people know who you are, what you do in that wonderful, exciting field of social work.
So, like as previously said, my name is Elise Cook, and I am an LMSW out of Charlottesville, Virginia. I work at the University of Virginia in their outpatient psychiatric clinic. I'm the only social worker in that clinic, and it's really been a great journey to like be able to create my own job within social work, which is not a real common thing. We hear a lot about like inpatient social work, but we don't hear a lot about outpatient social work in relation to hospital medical social work.
How long you been doing that?
I started in the like June, like end of May, beginning of June, and it kind of just came out of
2022?
yeah, 2022.
Okay.
I didn't even apply for this job. I like I wasn't even qualified for this job. I applied for something completely different. And during the interview, the my boss was like, "Yeah, we have this other job that's available, but you're not licensed yet, so I don't know if you'd be able to do it." And then he came back like 2 days later, and he was like, "Yeah, so we made it so that you could have the job that I was." And he was like, "Yeah, I just think that you're just more qualified than someone that we did have with the LCSW," which kind of goes back to our previous conversation. But so that's how I kind of found my way to Charlottesville. I wasn't living here, and I moved here for this job.
Oh, where were you living at before?
So I went to Radford University, which is, if you know where Blacksburg is or Virginia Tech, it's right there. And I was living in that area, and I did assertive community treatment for a bit. And then I kind of got burnt out doing that. And then I worked for DaVita for a little bit. And then I just like took a break. Like I took a month off. Like it's weird because I just graduated like in 2020 with my master's.
Okay.
And I just was so overwhelmed, like with the field and COVID. And I had like a patient commit suicide and my grandfather die. And it was just
Oh wow.
like, I need to just take a break. So I took a month off and I like applied to jobs I actually wanted. And I was offered all three jobs. Like it was special, I would say. Like I feel like everyone should have that time off to be able to really look for jobs they want. And I feel like we're so pressured. especially after graduation to find something because you had to pay back those loans. But
Right.
I would say like that was a real eye opener for me, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that.
Oh, no, that's great that you were able to find something like what you do. I have heard of Radford, I know they got a university. Like I only hear of Radford if they make like the NCAA tournament in
Yeah.
basketball. But that's how I heard it, like of Radford. But that's like to impactful. Like you had a client, complete suicide plus, a loss, and I think that's part of, like my background. Talk about, visually my background, my poetry book. Losing over 10 clients from COVID, and then having like my mom passing away from COVID at the same time period, and it's like, these stories need to be talked about and shared within our profession is like, and the way just how our government is all about capitalism. We kind of have to like move forward, get a job. We got bills to pay. We got families to support, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's always on the go, on the go, on the go, and it's like, but we just how the laws like, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
companies, they only want to give 3-5 days of bereavement leave, which is a a complete joke, and is
Mm-hmm.
like not always advocate for companies need to give some more time. Whatever time they give is never enough to
Yeah.
grieve a loss, but at the same time is like, okay, like, you just graduated from during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and then having these losses, and it's like it's a lot to unpack there.
Mm-hmm. When I first graduated, I went into a private practice residency, and I thought that would be, it was actually based out of Charlottesville. So that's kind of how I became like more familiar with Charlottesville and what it had to offer. And I really liked the patients I was working with, but I feel like no one really informed me of the toxicity that can also occur in private practice. I feel like our profession is always gearing towards, oh, go to private practice, you'll make
Hmm.
all this money, but they don't teach you like the business side of it. They don't teach you like being a part of a group practice. They don't teach you like how to market and pay taxes and all of that. And so that was like a really big eye opener for me.
Hmm.
And also being the only like person of color at a private practice, and seeing like non-equitable practices kind of just made me feel like nobody talks about any of these things. Like I don't know, I've been in the field for such a short amount of time, but I've literally been in every like sector, like the micro, the macro, the meso. I've been in every sector in like such a short period of time. Um, and I feel like I never was taught enough in my graduate program, my master's program, about any of them. Like we were taught the levels, but we weren't taught like what you may experience in those levels as far as like um work-based trauma. Like nobody talks about that.
You basically hit the nail on the head of why the Social Work Race podcast
Yes.
exists, and especially since like season 4, but I spent a lot of season 4 talking about entrepreneurship and why we cater social workers to private practice, but yet you don't want to talk about business taxes, applying for business credit. It's expensive and it's a lot of work to start your own business. Or shout out to everybody who works on 9 to 5 and then has their own LLC, their own business on the
Mm-hmm.
side, because it's like it is it's a lot, and it's like stuff that is not being taught in graduate schools. And for us, for Latinos and Black African Americans, there's other people of color that we, especially during COVID, and now we would be so killing it, financially, because so many people like need help, and it kind of like a trickle down effect, domino effect
Mm-hmm.
of the damn ASWB exam,
Yeah.
and it's like with the lack of us, particularly failing the exam, but then like people that we serve look like you and me that
Mm-hmm.
need the help, and we and people that look like you and me or the ones that have been impacted the most from COVID, and even prior to COVID, issues affect us uh, the, the most in many ways. So it's like why social work schools are not teaching all this stuff and teaching like workplace trauma because me, like usually the only male Latino
Hmm.
in any other jobs, and it wasn't until Latinx and Social Work Volume 2, the book that came out, by the way, is available on
Hmm.
Amazon for purchase. Um, that I've met other like male Latinos in the social work space. I was like, what? Like, and I only knew like one of them, like that I follow. Is like, where are you? Where have you been? Like, I've been looking for you guys for over 20 years in the social work field. So it's like, and I could count literally on one hand how many Latino male I've encountered that I've worked in the space the last 20, 21 years. So it's like that's real. These like
Yeah.
micro transgressions and all this stuff that exists in the field, or having other people's nonsense, like they throw their nonsense on you, and it's like
Hmm.
what worked for you is not going to work for me, or may not work for me. So why are you putting your stuff on on me? So it's real. Well,
Yeah.
everything you said is like you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah. Like in my program, I think we had two males, and one was white and one was black, my friend Latrell. And I think I found your podcast through, there was another podcast. It was like four black men. I know they stopped doing it recently. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, melanated social worker.
Yeah. So
Shout out to them.
yeah, they stopped doing their podcast, which made me
Yes.
like kind of sad.
Yes, it
Um,
made me very sad.
and was it just because they got like really busy? I can't
I,
remember why.
I don't know exactly what it's that. I know I follow them like individually, so they got a lot. They do a lot of stuff. So and they live throughout different parts of the country.
Okay.
So I don't know, but that's one of like my downers of a big downer of 2022. I was like what? But I was like I'll step up to the plate and keep going. So
Yeah, I think it's really important to have like this space because one, like if you just go on social media and people talk about social work, it's so negative. Like obviously, like this is a podcast. We could talk about the negative, but like there's so many positives of it too. And people always talking about you don't make no money in social work, and I'm just like, yeah, that could be true, but it also like you can also do multiple things, just like you're doing
mm,
multiple things and having like passive streams of income. Like all of that is also important.
or trying to
And
have passions, different streets of income. Trying.
and I only really follow social workers that are like positive about the field. That's one thing I have learned. Like I don't know if you follow Anima Way.
What's
That's her.
what's that? What's the handle?
So I think her handle is Anim Away. Like her first name is Anim, and her last way is Awe. So it's ANIMAWEH, and she's on TikTok as well. But she's like built up her social work brand to like she's licensed in like 3 different states. She
Mm.
does consulting. She does supervision. She's done like travel social work. Um, so yeah, I know that's not like super passive, but I feel
Right.
like she's a really good example of what like having fun and being prosperous in social work can look like.
No, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that are fun in the field, and
Mm-hmm.
I recently done some traveling and kind of like there's always like to put no memes or related to
Mm-hmm.
sport, like sports memes and related to social work, or just like some dancing videos or something related to social work, or like throwing stabs at the ASWB
Yeah.
or NASW. So it's like just like we need to laugh at like some of the like the nonsense that happens because we so serious. And yes, it's serious stuff that's happening in our profession, and you know like I mentioned on the podcast, NASW with their issues, especially on social media issues. from COVID. I hope things start to change with their new CEO, and I already reached out to the new CEO on the NASW. So let's see what happens, what they do, and like we mentioned, people of color. They've had people of color and on top on their boards in NASW, and still like messing up. So
Yeah.
it's like, hopefully, things changing, things are moving, and we're finding ways. Social workers are finding ways to use what they learn in school or just life, and just following their passions and with fundamentals of social work, and doing other things that may not need a license for. Or like,
Hmm.
you don't need a license to start a podcast. So I
Yeah.
started a podcast. And it's
Or be
something
a
I
life coach. Apparently, you could
not
be a.
like. Yeah, just be that's a whole conversation for a whole other time. Like, and I got close friends who are life coaches, and there's the whole like debate or regarding that's out of my realm that don't really want
Mhm.
to get into. But yeah, there's so many different things, and there's ways to try to make money, and doing different things, whatever you're passionate about, side projects you're doing. And it's like just a lot of, I think COVID has brought out the creativity, or just trying different things. We had the time, or some of us had the time to really sit back and like, let me do this, let me do this. I wrote a book, and then I wrote another book, and then, so it's like, you know, um, things seem to like fall in place, and whatever you got to look out for you first and foremost
Yeah.
before you could do, pretty much anything. And yeah, if you give back in a positive way to the profession, that's part of why I've done the podcast as well, as to give back. There's a lot of MSW students who listen. There's other licensed social workers who listen, other social workers that listen, that follow, and I try to follow people who bring positivity to the profession, and try to give back and do good work, and use the podcast as a connection tool. Is like, so in case I go out to these different states, like, hey, I'm coming to your state. What's out there that I need to go to? So it's like, it kind of, the creativity is out there to make money, and doesn't you don't necessarily have to be licensed. You can be licensed, not licensed. It's everybody gotta just follow whatever works for them individually, or within their family structure, and just do that. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody in profession says. What works for one person is not going to work for you.
Yeah. I feel like it really starts like we don't talk about CSWE, but I feel like it really starts with CSWE. Like we get to NASW and a lot of people can become not complacent, but we're used to the way we're treated because I think part of CSWE is not really advocating for social work students. Like we get used to not being paid in our master's programs when we have to do internships. We get used to not having anybody advocate for our behalf in our programs, when we go against like professors who have a lot of microaggressions or macroaggressions against us. And it's like, well, our program is CSW accredited, but we never really hear from CSWE. We just
No,
know
not at
our
all.
we just know our program has to be accredited by this body that has this I was able to go to the CSW conference one year and I was like, wow, like this is a real privilege because you get to actually meet people that are making the decisions for why the programs are the way they are. But at the same time, it's like, you want me to be educated in diversity and inclusion and all these other things, but at the same time, you won't advocate for me to be paid in these internship sites. And that just rolls into me not really wanting to have my worth when I get into my postmasters lifestyle.
Right.
And I've noticed that with a lot of my peers, and I've really been pushing them to advocate for better like raises and getting paid more and like asking for more money. Like one of my friends just got hired at a state hospital down here. And I said, even if you don't get what you ask for, like you need to ask because you never know what could be on the table for you if you don't ask. Um, and like getting clarity as far as what your sign-on bonus is and if it's going to be have taxes taken out and all these things that are not taught to us. And I feel like that should be a part of CSWE. Like you said earlier about the business aspect of social work. Why is that not an offering? Why is that not like a forced offering or elective or mandatory class we take if you want people to be in private practice? Because you're going to need private practice therapists. You're going to need people that understand insurance. Why is that not part of our programs? Like insurance isn't going away from my understanding. And from my job, I see how hard it is for older adults specifically. That's my niche, is older adults, to even have outpatient therapists because they have supplemental Medicare and nobody explained to them that therapists don't take supplemental Medicare if that's the primary. So, I mean, yeah. And I feel like nobody talked about insurance when I was in my master's program. They just expect you to learn about it when you get out, but that could be too late. You're going to be advising people how to accept or apply for Medicaid and Medicare. And in Virginia, I don't know about Delaware, but we got like 7 Medicaid MCOs. They all different things. You got to be paneled with each. You can't even be sick. You can be paneled with Medicaid, but then you have to be paneled with the 7 Medicaid MCOs that all pay different things. And then there's Medicare, and then there's the supplemental Medicare, and it's like who wants to go through all of this for like no money?
No, exactly.
And Medicare is changing. Like at my clinic, we have a policy where our patients have to come into the clinic in person twice a year. And in April, Medicare is going to make that across the board. Like my clinic is just gearing up to do it now, but because of COVID, they were a little bit more lax about it.
Right.
But think of all the telehealth places that accept Medicare that don't have an in-person office. How are they going to see people in person? They're just not going to take Medicare. And that's going to leave a huge gap for these older adults and disabled people that just don't have access.
Right. Or forcing those therapists to find office space that's going to take money from their profits and trying to like to see the people. So it's like, and whether they come or not, then so it's a domino effect. But also at the same time, when the government wants to do these cuts, the first things they get cut is Medicaid and Medicare. So it's like and then you don't want to do Medicare for all. So it's like, so how you trying to help trying to help the people if you always
I would love Medicare for all. That means everybody just got to apply for one insurance panel and, and we be on that one insurance panel and we bill the same thing depending on your area. And I think that's also an issue is I think a lot of people in the business side of social work talk about is like, we can't discuss our rates. So you may have a black and brown clinician getting less money than their white counterparts and they live in the same exact zip code because we're not allowed to discuss our rates. But meanwhile, there's actually laws when you're in the regular sector of you're allowed to talk about your rates, but the insurance companies get a pass.
It's all this stuff is needs to be talked about more. And even like I see like posts about like people like having like imposter syndrome about raising their rates, for private practice, and like you gotta get your money however you can get it. So it's like, and it's important, like, especially you renting an office just to do therapy or like doing the telehealth stuff, and I'm glad people got they got lax to do the telehealth, and I hope somehow that continues. But a lot of this COVID stuff is slowly coming away. And you mentioned insurance. I know at my job we're gearing up for several probably a couple hundred people like having their being forced to like pre-COVID apply for Medicaid and like give all the documentation to prove that you qualify for Medicaid. So a lot of people is going to lose their Medicaid and going to be forced to apply for for ACA or Obamacare, as
Mhm.
people like to call it. And so it's like we're gearing up for a lot of people losing insurance and under our Ryan White HIV program, and gearing up for people having to apply for that, even though Ryan White doesn't have like a lot of funding. So it's like everything's like the funding source, and is like the government needs to provide services. You always talk about mental health, and it's like, all right, so provide the funding. So let's see what this Republican House representative dominant do. I mean, they like to always
Nothing.
cut,
They do
always
nothing.
cut. So I mean,
Yeah.
they got 2 years. So
I don't know. I think we have a new governor. Yeah, our new governor is Republican, and he doesn't make any sense, like at all. He's talking about um what is it in the schools when they talk about what is that acronym with they're teaching Black history? I can't remember what the acronym is.
talking about critical race
This,
theory,
yeah, he was like,
CRT.
yeah, he doesn't want CRT in the schools, but like he wants to be real strict about it. And it doesn't make any sense. And he doesn't like understand, like, he really was pushing for kids to go back into schools like during COVID, like 2021 was pushing kids to go back into schools, and the parents wanted
Mhm.
that
I can
because they did
understand why.
kids. You didn't like your daughter home with you all the time.
Well, just to be I was lucky that, you know, the job the so this is my time for those that don't know. So I left New York 20 October 2020, moved to literally like October 19th was my last day in my job in Harlem. Mm, had a suitcase, got on Amtrak, went to Delaware, moved, and I started a new job the next day in Delaware. Worked until I saw my first paycheck, and I was like, I can not afford getting a house with this paycheck. So I started looking for another job. Stayed there until like December, and the school system. There was an opening in the school system because one of the social workers was about to retire, and worked at the. They hired me, worked at the school system like for the 6 months. They didn't renew my contract, so spent that whole summer looking for a new job.
Mm-hmm.
Worked at another school, at another district for that year, which was crazy. So the first full year, the kids went back into the school system. I'm actually working in the school buildings compared to like the other job that I had was it was so I had like I was in charge of 5 different schools. So I was like sometimes I was doing more home visits than actually going into the school buildings. I try not to go to the school building because of COVID. If I didn't have to, I was not going into the building. I would do a home visit and meet people like in their foyers or like garage areas or outside their
Mm-hmm.
house meeting people. And I spent a lot of time working with Latino families. They wanted me to cater more towards them with the caseloads, and we had like a lot of like migrating families from like Colombia and Venezuela that was coming into the neighborhood and helping them registering for schools and stuff like that. So doing all that paperwork and translating and all that other stuff. So was doing that, and it was like hybrid, so I was didn't have to go into the office like 5 days a week. I just kind of like made my own schedule. So I spent a lot of time at home. Both kids arguing with them, turn on camera, pay attention. My fiance at the time was like, "Turn on your camera." It was like, no, threatening them. If you don't turn on your camera, I will smack you back of your head. If you don't turn on your camera, stop having this conversation every day. So it was like having those. So yeah, I get why parents wanted their kids back in the school. For a long story, for the
But then
long-winded answer, but
Virginia, they don't like what they're teaching in the school. So it's like you want them back in the school, but you only want them to learn what you wanted them to know. So
yeah, no,
it was that's what was mind boggling.
yeah, it doesn't make sense that you don't want to teach Black history. I mean, Black history is American history, and also the sex education is mind-boggling as well. Not wanting to teach, okay, those basic those biology, like where like babies come from, like important. So like, so you don't want to teach sex education, but then when the kids start having sex, and it's like, so you want a rise in STDs, which is going to
Mm-hmm.
rise of health 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 insurance premiums and all this stuff. So like now you got to pay for medications that you didn't have to pay for medicines, and want more people be like diagnosed with STDs and HIV and AIDS. So it's like you can't have it both ways. Like it does,
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense. So
And then
it,
like anti-abortion. So like you don't want kids to learn
yeah,
about sex.
exactly.
You don't want to provide
Condoms,
contraception.
right?
And then when they get pregnant, you don't want to give them any alternative to the pregnancy besides adoption, which I kind of go back and forth about adoption because that could be a traumatic process as
Mm-hmm.
well. And I really don't want a 10-year-old to be pregnant anyway. So I
Exactly.
don't really think adoption should be an option there. Because I don't think anybody should go through that trauma, especially a child.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, it's rough. And in states that they don't teach, what I've learned is in states that they don't teach the other forms of sex education, they have the highest rates of teen pregnancy. So clearly it's not working. The abstinence is not working.
I get why they want to like that. Obviously, abstinence has to be part of the conversation, but it can't be like the only thing. Like people are gonna do stuff, and it's like more and more. It just doesn't make it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Just put the money out there. Like there's obviously the government printed all this money during the pandemic, and rightfully so, because we'd be totally like freaking crashed. Like we'd be like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a third world country, or at least like financial wise, right now they didn't do that, which is why we have a recession. So it doesn't matter who was going to be the president, as much as people want to blame Biden for the recession. Even if Trump would have won, we would kind of
Yep.
more likely be in the recession that we sort of in. So it's like, um, and the whole world is kind of going through that same recession right now. So it's kind of like doesn't matter who was president; it was
Mm-hmm.
happening regardless. So, but you printed all this money is not going into you talk about mental health and social services. Yes, the government did give out some money, and then you got states like Florida, Texas, and now apparently like Virginia too. That's not money that should be going for proper like education or sex education, mental health and all this stuff, and hiring more workers, and like where the money's going, like the whole water crisis in Mississippi. Apparently,
Mm-hmm.
the state got the money, but the state didn't pay for where it needed to go to help their water crisis. And then you want to like and
Oh man.
and they own like state capital, and like you having like if it wasn't for Jackson State, like the state would really be like a third world country. So thank you, Coach Prime, for putting money in the community.
Yeah, I know in Virginia, like the mental health issue is really a big deal. I think it was last year we have like 5 state mental health hospitals. And this kind of goes back to my like client that I think I was telling you that committed suicide, but I think 3 out of them were closed. Like they were not taking
Mm,
any more patients, and it was because the acuity had gotten so high that the patients were so violent to staff members that staff were leaving in droves and the state was not doing anything. So they literally had to close or like temporarily close those hospitals
right.
to try to figure out like how we can increase staffing, how we can give more money, how we can really support the staff there. And I just saw an email from Senator Tim Kaine saying that they're going to actually add on to a mental health facility in Southwest Virginia, which doesn't really have a lot of mental health facilities at all.
Mm,
And Virginia also has, and that was like I think that was recent, so they're going to spend like 300,000 to expand and have more beds at this unit. So that was one thing I was glad to see. But my patient that actually committed suicide, they have this rule in Virginia that I don't know if it's like this in Delaware, but if you go in the ER, they can place you anywhere in the state.
Oh
And
wow.
that comes from, I think there was a judge, his son, he had to kill his own son because there wasn't any room in that local hospital for him. And he was having a psychotic episode. And so we have
Wow.
patients that will go 3 hours away, 4 hours, 5 hours away just to go to a mental health facility or sit in the ER for 3 days, and then be discharged, who are still suicidal, who are still homicidal with no real like follow up care. Um, and I think that's a good step of like you said, like we need to really be investing in these mental health facilities because there's not even a lot of juvenile mental health facilities for
Mhm.
kids to go to without them literally just locking kids in like prisons, like mini prisons,
Right.
and just giving them medication. So yeah, I think that's where my biggest struggle with like where I think the money should be going is like mental health facilities for people. And obviously social services, we need that as well to help those people when they transition out. But being on that side, like my internship was in one of those facilities, I see them struggle the most.
No, yeah, I mean, I saw, seeing kids, just struggling just because the work being hard, or even trying to get on the Zoom to even try to even like go into their classroom through Zoom, and they couldn't. There's a lot of rural, there's a lot of farmland where I live at, and it doesn't matter what service you had, no matter what provider, like the Wi-Fi, mini Wi-Fi's were giving out was not going to work. So it was like, so a lot of parents didn't want to go back into the school building, so they end up, missing class, and they end up having to go to court because they missed all this time in school, and it's that we got to do the paperwork to for them missing school is not uh fault of their own. He's just it became part of the territory. So
Yeah.
so it's a lot. I mean, but yet I mean, the government want to give all this money to different countries, and it's like, why can't put the money here, and it's like when we need it, instead of these different lobbyists in DC that ask for all this money, and the government caters to them. So it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. It's just a lot, and all we can do is continue to advocate,
Hmm.
and I know there's especially here in Delaware, there's a lot of services that they need just regular outpatient clinics that just need more of them, and more available throughout the state, not have a whole bunch. And there's 3 counties here in Delaware, so a lot of them is like in the main city in Wilmington. Like if you hear Wilmington, is because Biden. You see,
Hmm.
um, so there's a lot of social service agencies there, and it's kind of very few trickle down further south you go, and there's like in the central, there's like a little bit, and then in the south where I work at is kind of like scattered around, but it's not enough, and just the whole transportation system is not existing. If you don't got a car, then and you need services, you kind of unfortunately kind of screwed.
Yeah. It's
For
like that here too.
yeah, so it's like, and it sucks because you're trying to help people, but you stuck, and it's like you try to think outside the box, and it's like there's only so much you can do.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. My sister actually lives in Delaware. I think she lives like near Bethany Beach.
Okay,
Um,
that's not far from where I work at.
yeah, she lives in one of those like nice beach houses. But she talks a lot about how like the older people that live there, there's not a lot of access to like medical care.
Hmm.
And more people are moving there like permanently, like year round. And she's
Hmm.
like, I had to go into Philly to go see my dentist because there's like no dentist here, or they're like booked out for a whole
Hmm.
year. And so it's like, well, who is in charge of like encouraging more people to invest in the healthcare system in that area? Like, yeah, you have
Hmm.
all these rich people coming in with all this money and building up
Yeah.
all the houses, but who's gonna take care of these people? Like, who's gonna provide therapy?
No,
Um,
exactly.
so nobody thinks about that. It's just houses. They just want the pretty stuff, but
Yeah.
you need to be able to have a quality of life type
Yeah,
of
total
situation.
quality, total holistic quality of life. It's mental, it's physical, it's everything. And I totally agree. And I'm like, well, you got the president who's a native Delawarean. I'm looking at the governor, like, which I had the pleasure. I met him one time when I got the first booster. So it just happened, just randomly, like he was there, like doing promo shots and stuff. Like
Oh, Biden or the governor of Delaware?
the governor of Delaware. Um, I think I saw Biden once on a bicycle. I couldn't confirm if it was him or not, but he had a bunch of the person that was had a bunch of people driving like in bicycles like around him. So I'm pretty sure that was him.
Yeah.
But the governor met him one time and I was like, bro, the president is a native Delaware. You can't ask on the side, like ask for for a couple more dollars for the state. And it's like and it's like, like state need money. There's all this land and instead of they want to do all these building communities of like single family homes literally from scratch, which is why I kind of like what gravitated me to move down here, like literally communities built from scratch that
Mm-hmm.
used to be farmland. And it's like, okay, so what about supportive housing? What about a boys and girls club or something recreational for these kids to do, or mix, boys and girls club with outpatient mental health clinic and provide a contract to these people, or bring in have other agencies kind of like open up that are in other states come into Delaware and invest in the youth and young adults and adults here and kind of open up social service agencies here instead of like using farmland just be nothing but houses. So it's like and I try to bring it up in like Facebook groups and stuff like that. Like it's like and people just kind of like read the comments like nothing like but then you want to like complain and they're like, all right, so I'm giving you a solution, a possible solution
Like
to the
message.
problem we all facing, and it's like nothing, nothing happens, and it's like the school board don't really do much other than like if it's not about about the high school sports teams, is like they just don't care. If we don't win the state championship, one of the teams win the state championship, they don't care.
But like it does affect those people because once them kids
Exactly.
and they have nothing to do, they gonna start doing stuff they're not supposed to do, and then people are
Exactly.
gonna be complaining about, well, why are these kids like this, or shouldn't they go to college? Aren't there only like 3 state colleges in Delaware?
Yeah,
There's
everybody
like,
either go to UD or they go to Dell State and I know Dell State is getting a lot of money in terms of different things, and they're trying to do. They recently had their president is really trying to do a lot of things, but that takes time to really see
mm-hmm.
where the money's actually not going. But so and other small like community colleges, and there's another university as well. So it's like it's it's like stuff to do, but stuff is like on a down low, and you got to know people. Like I said, if you're not doing something in kind of, I think like sports kind of opens the door to like
Mm-hmm.
everything else. And Delaware, all the agencies do a terrible job promoting what they do in the community to try to help out. So unless if you don't see it on social media, you just don't know what exactly is going on. Or unless you work in a hospital or you work in the school system, you don't know what's going on.
That could be a good opportunity, like for consulting, obviously, like bridging the hospital systems and the social services agencies. Like I know they're probably already connected,
Yeah.
but as far as like having joint ventures in the community and like really helping as far as like doing health fairs and doing community activism, like I've learned like being inside of a healthcare system that we have a lot of like bargaining power in the community, and we don't really work with the local agencies. We don't really know what they do. We don't know what they
Right.
offer, unless we need something from them. And then it's like, oh yeah, how you doing? Can you Salvation Army? I got this patient. I'm gonna need you
Yeah.
to have some housing for them, or one of our shelters is actually closing down. Like from what I've heard, they're only winter only. And why we only have one shelter in the whole city of Charlottesville when there's all these students, all these people? Unless you're domestic violence, then you may have
Right.
two options. But
Right.
other than that, it's Salvation Army.
Yeah, we got one major shelter as well. Like we need to open it up another shelter. Not everybody in the whole state could go to that one shelter that never has any openings. It's like every time you call, if we don't have
Somebody
openings.
looked at my face when I called them. I said, I have this patient and he needs housing. Well, how old is he? And I said, I think he's like 65. Oh no. It laughed in my face, like, that's funny. You thought you was gonna get a bed. And I was just like, why is this funny? Like,
Yeah.
this is not funny.
It's really not, because people, a lot of people gonna be losing their housing within this year if
Yeah.
the government don't get it together. Recession gets worse. I mean, that when I first heard of possible recession, obviously I thought about 2008 and how it affected social work. I know you mentioned the hospitals being closed. I worked in Queens in New York, and there was like three hospitals, two like in Jamaica in Queens, and there was another hospital like Elmer's house, and there was like a couple other ones in downtown in New York City that closed down. So it was like that was like the beginnings of it, and people like preventive services agencies were closing or like kind of like merging together. So people who were, like just left foster care and got preventive services, a lot of those agencies closed down. So it was like a lot happening. So I was wondering what that was going to look like in our profession and throughout the cities and the different states, what they were looking like. So I mean, I haven't really heard too much, at least not yet. Like it's
Yeah.
starting, but like the Medicaid is happening. You got to recertify that's happening, and a lot of people that were getting money, like extra COVID money, that's being gone. So people go back to budget how they did prior to COVID.
Yeah. I think also, like, if you look at what happened in Georgia, they only have like one major hospital right now, I'm sure in Atlanta. Um, and the one that they closed was where all the Black and brown people lived, and they closed because they didn't want to accept Medicaid funding. The governor didn't want to accept Medicaid funding.
What
And
is that
so
governor doing?
I don't know, like setting them up for failure, pretty much. So I haven't heard much about it since they closed, but it's like you would think that that would be something that is more talked about, especially for those people that voted for Stacey Abrams,
Exactly.
and they're now suffering because they don't have access to healthcare.
Yeah, I don't know. And I went to Atlanta last year. Like obviously Atlanta is so big, you're not gonna like for you need like a week just to kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
at least a week go through like all the different parts of Atlanta, but or at least the nicer parts, touristy stuff in Atlanta. But um, it's just so like it seemed like from especially during that election, it seemed like it was like Atlanta versus like the rest of the states. So
Yes,
so
I
I
was
don't want to. I don't
there.
understand. I don't understand like and I had like somebody recently talk about like education in terms of politics and stuff, but I think people need to like be educated more on the actual like what happens like if I vote for this guy, what actually or woman, what actually is gonna like may happen, like actually follow what they talking about, and it's like how that might affect me or anybody day in day out. Like you're gonna cut this, okay, how does that affect this? And it's like let me go back to cutting Medicaid, Medicare, and there's no reason why a huge city like Atlanta have like one hospital where everybody for the last like 5 years has been like trying to move to Atlanta, the surrounding borough, and Atlanta's is like real hot to a point that's like the housing market is crazy. It even became expensive now, so it's like
Oh,
you can't like you need like at least like 600,000 just to even sniff at a house now in Atlanta. It's not like it used to be
yeah, it used
like
to be really cheap to live down there. Like you could
yeah,
get mini mansion for like 300, 350, and that's
yeah.
not And Texas too, like they just had their election and they voted in the same Greg Abbott who didn't care about the grid. Um, and I don't understand. Like I feel bad for the people that do get out and vote in areas like that because you can tell like they're really putting their best foot forward and they're just not enough of them.
Mm. Or at least not yet, or they're not old enough, or I think within the next like few years as like I think like the younger generation are really kind of like paying attention to what's out there. You got like the teens who like 15, 16, like they 17, and it's like this is not working. And they want
Like
to do something about it, but they are as they gotta wait till they 18 to actually vote, but they like starting like they have these conversations and it's like okay, the next cycle like 2024, I think we might see that, or definitely 2028. I think that's really you're gonna see like I was even like today as it just recorded, I saw Representative Jeffries was talking, gave like a huge speech, and I put it in the comments. Jeffries 2028 for president. It's just it's just a lot, and it affects our work, what we do day in day out, and we need to continue to talk about politics. And I've had people who ran for different offices on the podcast, and more of us continue to need to get out and who know more about like day in day out issues than us who are who do the front lines day in day out and kind of like help educate people on the different things. And like I've had conversations with people who are freaking captains in police departments, and it's like who are like diehard like Republicans, and it's like but your parents are like the same age as mine, and you don't want this. So that means you don't want that for your
yeah,
for your parents, for your aunts and stuff. So like what are you doing?
yeah. Or like you see, like as a police officer, you see the mental health issues, like you see them firsthand,
Mm,
and you know that people that you're arresting could really just need like mental health care, and to like vote against the interest of like what impacts you every day is just like it
yeah,
blows.
yeah. Because people just don't they just don't think they. I think people just vote party and die vote Republican my whole life. I'm going to continue to vote or vote Democrat the whole life. You really need to vote just based on what affects you day in day out. And
Yeah,
if that happens to be a person of the opposite party or a third party, I think we're I think we've gone past the two party system that it really needs another party or two parties need to be involved in whatever. I don't think we ever might see that because we stuck on this 1,000 year old freaking constitution. But
yeah,
it's a change is definitely coming and it's happening slowly already. With politicians who've been there for like years and years, finally retiring slowly, and it's like a new guard happening, but that's happening slowly. So it's and it kind of trickles, and you kind of see that also like in social work that people been there forever. Like you get a job like in one of our states and like a state job or any you there like 20 years. Like you're not there's no reason for you to go anywhere unless like you leave on your own. So
yeah. That's one of my like things that I tell people coming into the field. Like, don't be afraid to leave because you have an MSW. You're valuable. You don't have to stay like unless you like have to stay somewhere. You are valuable. You don't have to stay somewhere that doesn't treat you right. And I like I said, I stayed somewhere for 2 weeks. I was like, they are racist and I'm not gonna be a part of it. So I'm gonna leave. And I ended up finding places that were better. And I know some people don't have that opportunity, but like I think part of it is never stopping to look for what you want your career to look like. Like if you have a vision for what you want to do with your social work degree, continue to look
mhm.
for positions that are going to satisfy that. Like there is really no loyalty to these agencies because you could die tomorrow and they're going to have to fill your slot.
Nah, No, that is facts. And even if you're good or you're comfortable somewhere, just is good just to continue to see what's out there. That's why when you're ready to leave and you kind of have this idea of what's already out there, or you kind of see a pattern of like different agencies that like you still looking for a social worker, like and be like 2 years later, see like the position is still available. It's like so you're already ruling out agencies you don't want. Like there's got to be a red flag, something going on for.
Yeah, the job I left, they had that opening for like 6 months, and then when I left, they still don't have a social worker, and that's not even a public agency. That's a private corporation.
Mm.
And it's like you're right, like they have it. The office I was working at was right across from where I went to school that has an MSW program. So how are you right across from a school that offers MSW and you can't find an MSW that wants to work there? Something is off.
Yes.
That is a red flag.
No, that's a huge red flag. And it's like I think maybe MSW programs, maybe because of relationships that they have in communities, stuff like that, that they're not going to teach that, but that's something that's going to come with experience. But definitely like look out for red flags such as like that. So that's a huge red flag. Like if
Yes.
you can't even like do a recruiting visit to the school and be like, hey, we looking, or like something, or like
You would think.
one of the professors like, okay, I want to bring in like somebody that worked from the agency and just talk about the agency, or we're looking and this and that, and or even like they may have to like just lower their standards of they look. Okay, we hire you with you got your to show proof of your degree, and we work our way, maybe get some paperwork sign off by your LC or something like that. There has to be.
So that agency, like Davita, doesn't actually like pay do your supervision.
Mm,
As a
yeah, that's part
that's
of.
part of the red flag is like they want you to have your LCSW, but they're not willing to hire someone without it and give them supervision. And when we talk about the ASWB and we talk about the barriers to getting licensed, it's not just, oh, it's so easy to work somewhere for 2 years consistently
Mm,
and get all your hours and take the test, because the test is biased.
yes,
So you're using this certification as the cream of the crop of what you need to work there, and it's not even equitable.
right.
It's not even a fair, you know, scale.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Now you mentioned the test, and you had an offline conversation that your mom is a, a social worker and actually teaches how to pass the test. How your mom get into field, and what's that dynamic like of having a daughter, somebody who's a social worker and actually teaches people about the test?
So my mom, she's from DC, and she became a social, like she knew that she wanted to become a social worker because her neighbor was a social worker growing up. So she has
Mm,
always been in that field. And I think she started, I want to say 15 years ago with this company. So it's FAJ Inc. And she teaches for the exam. She has licensure prep courses. She has tutoring for the exam. She also does therapy. But she also travels. So if you know anyone that would be interested, like she has offered to even come to my university and do like a introductory, like 1 day seminar or something about preparing for the test. So she's open to even doing things like that. But she, I guess, just really has a passion for teaching people, and she's really good at explaining the test to people. She doesn't have like the rates for how many people pass, because
mm,
people, take their time. They may not take the test right after they take the class. But she has a lot of people just come to her based off of referrals because people do so well with her courses. So yeah, definitely reach out to her. She does classes, I want to say every month or every other month. She has a 3 day class. She has a 2 day class. She has, I think, a 6 week class. So if you just feel like you need a refresher, you could do the weekend class or tutoring, which is one on one. Or if you feel like you need the long game, she has those longer week classes, which is like every Tuesday for a couple hours.
Mm,
And I think having it in a class format, like she even has a classroom, like she built a classroom onto our house to like do this class because she found it to be really important. Um, and I would say a lot of the social workers in DC and Maryland have her to thank for why there's many more of them in the field that look like us because she
mm.
kind of caters to our population.
Besides the, and that's huge, catering to the population, but the actual like test prep, what's the difference between how your mom does it in, compared to there's so many different ones, and I think that's part of the struggle of the MSW student is like, all right, I've seen like the Dawn book, I've seen I know there's a guy in Michigan, he does classes on YouTube.
Oh yeah, I've seen.
I've had like the boot camp, as we call it in New York. There's like that, and Dr. Shapiro, who I had on the podcast, she has her course. Like, so what's different that your mom does?
I feel like it's just her personality. As far as like, so she has a book that she teaches out of, but like she also does the tutoring, which is really one on one. And I think she learns how people respond to different questions. So she has people do like a pre-test, and so she can learn how what people are struggling with for her for the exam. And then she kind of can center the course around that, and she knows what each individual person in her class has gotten on the pre-test, so she can kind of cater to who is in her classroom. And then she does a post test and still offers that tutoring. And if people want to come back, I think she offers like a discounted rate if people want to come back if they don't do well in the test. So I think she really gets to know who is in her class. The other with the other courses, I feel like it may be a one size fits all type of situation where you're going in, you're reviewing this exam, you're reviewing this test book, you're taking these practice tests, but you're not really getting to know the people in your class. You're not really
Right.
getting to form study habits, breaking down the questions individually. I know the one guy on YouTube does that, but like you're not getting the same feedback. And she does
Mm,
in person and telehealth, and she also travels. So
okay.
I feel like that kind of sets her apart. And she's also been in the field for how old am I? Like close to 30 years. So she not only has seen the test evolve over time, but she
Mm,
keeps up to date on what it's looking like. Um, and she's worked in every sector of social work. So I feel like she understands like if you're struggling with certain questions, why you'd be struggling with them. And it's not like, oh, you should know this, you should do better, but more so, yeah, I understand why you would think that, but the test is going to ask you for this question. So you need to be able to think like this as well. So it's not just recollection or trying to remember a ton of stuff. It's actually understanding the question, why it's framed that way, and understanding that you don't have to, do exactly what the test says when you graduate, but just
right.
to pass this test, you need to focus on how it's asking you the question.
Right. Yeah, it's not that, no, that's fascinating to, and the test is changing again. I saw something about it's only going to be three questions, and there's some other minor, at least three answers
Okay.
to the questions. So it's like they're taking out like all of the above or whatever like that fourth answer was, or I don't know how much of a difference that's going to be, but I'm always like, screw the exams or F the exam. uh, or FAASWB. By the way, I saw those T-shirts online too. So, so it's like, um, but people have different aspirations in terms of career. That's I'll go back to just whatever works for you. If you feel you want to take it for you, then you want to because you want to do clinical work, or you want to do this, or you at an agency and they require it for because of their contracts and stuff. Then obviously by all means we do it. Or you want to do social work and don't need it, or got nothing to do, nothing to do with taking the exam, then and you're able to sustain yourself and your lifestyle, then do that too. So like it shouldn't be like one or the other. There's so many things that we could do, and there's also many people who I follow. They're like look at what all the stuff you can do with MSW. So it's like that education needs to be more out there as well, and give MSW students that opportunity. That there's so many things you could do, and I'm still learning
Mm-hmm.
as well. That because I've always been stuck on the licensing piece to at least 2019, 2020, and it's like what? Like when my coworker told me like grandfather in, I was willing to pay like any type of money. Like, it's like
It was
what?
more investment to you because of what you had already gone through.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it was like, and then to just be, and like I renewed, and they didn't ask for like my CEUs, like all the CEUs I did. That was like, hey, here's your my email with my renewal for 2025. I was like, I had to like go back and like put in like all the one by one all the CEUs I did. They didn't even like bother like looking at it. Like, here's your license. You good to 2025. I was like, all right,
Yeah, I guess they just
I'll keep paying whatever. Even if you increase the fees, like I'll keep paying it as long as I'm gotta I don't gotta pay to take a test, and I'm not trying to do the LC like anytime soon.
yeah. All right. Well, I got
Where can people find you?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So, I would say find me on LinkedIn because I like to post on LinkedIn, and I feel like that's the most professional way to find me. Um, so it's just Elise Elease Cook Cook. And if you type in like the LinkedIn website, I can send it to you as well. But I have a short link with just my last name, Elise Cook, after the LinkedIn. And just send me a message that you found me through this podcast, and I'll be sure to add you. I really feel like that's the best way to network. I found a lot of my jobs that I've applied for through LinkedIn, and I've had good success through there. I want to thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
No. Thank you, for this, great conversation, and it was very enlightening, and I hope people take even willing to take take notes, because a lot of stuff we talked about, is real, and it affects our work day in day out in terms of our clients, and the insurance piece is only going to get worse before it gets better. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to have these continue to have these conversations. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.